Next on the news, 'tis the season to be jolly, but is inflation killing your spirit and your budget?
It's one of the longest Christmas lists in the city, 12,000 families in need. I'm Jessica Easthope with why one organization says the holiday magic wouldn't work without the tablet.
A look inside the campaign that could save Christmas. And babies with RSV, New York City hospitals overflowing. Will the virus get worse before it gets better? Plus, protesters in China say enough is enough. Rare calls for the president to step down. Is the COVID chaos doing more harm than good? We talked to a family who says restrictions killed their patriarch. Then he's on the road to sainthood, but first he's being made a superhero. Tech whiz teen Carlo Acutis is now entering the comic book world. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. Putting food on the table and gifts under the tree is a bigger challenge this year than ever before. Families struggling to make ends meet might not have Christmas toys top of mind, but that's where the tablet steps in. The paper's Bright Christmas campaign, ensuring no child goes without a gift, is officially underway. And one anti-hunger organization in Brooklyn is getting ready to make holiday magic happen once again, saying it's only possible because of the tablet newspaper. Current News' Jessica Easthope has the story from Bensonhurst.
When Sandra Bazemore walks into Reaching Out Community Services, she knows she's going to be treated with dignity and respect. They've given her family more than food. During the Christmas season, Reaching Out has given her and her two sons hope.
The community is definitely not forgetting about us, unfortunately. So I know I'm very thankful for it.
Sandra's boys are two of hundreds of children that get toys during Reaching Out's Operation Christmas Smiles event every year.
With the hard time that's going on right now with me and my children, but I was able to see their eyes open and they had something to wake up to.
When we get something like Bright Christmas, it makes a tremendous difference in the success of that event.
The event wouldn't be possible without the tablet's Bright Christmas campaign. Founder and executive director Tom Neve says this year he anticipates needing more toys. There's been a 40% increase in people coming through these doors.
It's really a challenge because the need is great. We have to make sure the support factor levels up to that. They could just choose their foods like...
When people walk into Reaching Out Community Services, they shop for their food at a kiosk, but the bill never comes. A receipt pops out in the back, and employees get to work, gathering orders. They have the resources to feed 125 people a day. But Tom says when they're falling behind, Bright Christmas picks up the slack, and just like Santa, delivers on a promise to give every child a toy.
Sometimes people just don't want to hear about God. They want to see God in you. And there's the evidence.
Reaching Out Community Services will be holding their holiday event Operation Christmas Smiles this year on December 17th. In Bensonhurst, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Now that you know all about the Bright Christmas mission, the tablet needs your help. The staff at the paper is hoping to top last year's record of $117,000 and raise $125,000 before Christmas. The need is great this year for families fighting inflation. Here's how you can get involved. Make a check out to the Bright Christmas Fund and mail it to Bright Christmas LB number 2118, P.O. Box 95,000, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the zip code 19195. Or you can make your donation online at thetablet.org/brightchristmas. And don't worry if you missed it. We'll give out this information again at the end of this newscast. And we'll have even more holiday magic this week. Tomorrow, Jessica will introduce us to some students who are taking the tablet's cause into their own hands. They have a plan to donate some of their money so that other kids can have a Christmas morning as good as their own. Jessica will tell us all about it tomorrow on Currents News. But before we get to December 25th, we have the entire Advent season to celebrate. It kicked off Sunday, and the Bishop of Brooklyn, Robert Brennan, wants to make sure the faithful do not rush through the 4 weeks and instead use the time to prepare.
As you start to get your homes ready for this time of Christmas. Let's use the season of Advent to get our hearts ready, to make room in our busy lives for the coming of Christ, who wants to show us love beyond all measure.
Bishop Brennan says during this Advent season, try not to get caught up in your daily routine and instead take notice of what really matters. This Thanksgiving weekend, Americans traveled at pre-pandemic levels to see those who matter most. And the rest of the Christmas season, we can expect to see the same. But with a so-called triple-demic circulating right now, many are wondering if it's safe, especially for babies. Mike Valerio has the story.
The holiday season is in full swing and people are hitting the roads and skies at nearly pre-pandemic numbers. At the same time, a triple threat of viruses looms. Respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, in particular, is causing major concerns for children. And according to Dr. Anthony Fauci, it's at a critical point, approaching an emergency.
In some regions of the country, we're seeing that the hospital system for pediatrics are at the point of almost being overwhelmed. When you have very little wiggle room of intensive care beds, when you have like almost all the intensive care beds that are occupied.
With the trifecta of COVID, flu, and RSV circulating right now, Dr. Fauci says protecting yourself this holiday season begins with your vaccination status.
We have 2 of the 3 of the trifecta. We have vaccinations for clearly COVID, particularly with the updated boosters that are now available. We have vaccinations for influenza.
Medical experts suggest that if you're going to be getting together with others, go back to the basics and use common sense. Stay up to date on vaccines, wash your hands, and wear a mask around others if you're in the vulnerable category. Suggest everybody take a quick COVID test also before getting together. One silver lining, though, other countries have already seen their flu and RSV numbers peak early and start to come down.
We're hoping that that's going to happen because both flu and RSV have come to us earlier than it usually does.
Mike Valerio, Currents News.
New York City emergency rooms are struggling to handle RSV cases. The head of the pediatric intensive care unit at Long Island Jewish Hospital in Queens said the 37-bed unit is already over capacity, with more than half of its patients with RSV. According to the CDC, some 80,000 children under the age of 5 are usually hospitalized with RSV each year. But doctors say the disease is spreading more quickly because so many children were living in a germ-proof bubble for years. At the beginning of November, the city reported more than 4,500 positive cases. That's a nearly tenfold increase since mid-September, when they reported nearly 500 cases. The virus is expected to peak in December. The triple-demic comes as protesters in China are calling for their president to step down, saying his extreme COVID measures aren't saving lives, but taking them. Coming up on Currents News, we speak to one family who lost their patriarch to China's COVID chaos. They say the country's massive lockdowns and forced quarantining delayed medical help when they needed it most. The full story coming up on Currents News. Now to the latest on crime in New York City, and it's nothing to brag about for Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. While crime is up, prosecutions are down. According to data from the district attorney's office, since taking office on January 1st, Bragg has downgraded more than half of his felony cases to misdemeanors, and he's lost half of the felony cases that went to court. Let's break down the numbers. 51% of felony cases Bragg has handled have resulted in convictions. That's compared to 68% of cases in 2019, the last year before the pandemic disrupted the courts. While Bragg has downgraded 52% of felonies to misdemeanors, his predecessor downgraded just 39% 3 years ago. As far as bail is concerned, it's been requested in 49% of Bragg's felony cases compared to 69% in 2019. And the Manhattan DA has declined to prosecute 35% of the felonies that have crossed his desk. There's a lot more news headed your way, including chaos in China. Protesters and police converge on streets across the country, why there's widespread anger and defiance. And a Catholic cardinal in China is convicted for supporting previous protesters in the country. Plus this.
It is overwhelming, but at the same time, it's just the most wonderful feeling in the world.
This 53-year-old woman is reunited with her family decades after her disappearance. Tonight on Currents News, the biggest opposition in decades. From Shanghai to Beijing, rare protests erupting across the country.
Every conscientious Chinese should be here.
Citizens demanding their freedom from China's COVID chaos. They want the president to step down tonight. These protests are the largest show of dissent against the Communist Party in decades. As crowds grew at demonstrations in multiple major cities over the weekend, so has the police presence and the grievances. The protesters want greater democracy and freedom. They want Xi Jinping gone. For 3 years, the Chinese leader has overseen a strategy of mass testing, brute force lockdowns, enforced quarantine, and digital tracking. Protesters believe these measures have cost human life.
I'm overwhelmed. Every conscientious Chinese should be here. They don't have to voice their opinions, but I hope they can stand with us.
The Chinese government hasn't made a comment on the protests or the criticism of Xi, but they had eased some restrictions. Still, analysts do not expect the government to fully back down on its strategy anytime soon. According to the protesters, that will just lead to more unnecessary deaths. The city of Beijing has promised it will no longer block access to apartment buildings where infections are found. But for some, that's too little too late. Selena Wang spoke to one family who says they lost a loved one because of these restrictions.
They sit together, sobbing, shaking, looking at photos of his father, her husband. They mourn his death at their home on the outskirts of Beijing. The local government killed my dad, he tells me, breaking down in tears. I just want to get justice for my dad. Why did you lock us down? Why did you take my dad's life away? His 58-year-old father needed emergency medical help when their building was locked down. He says there were no COVID cases in the building, but China seals off entire neighborhoods, even when there are only suspected cases nearby.
Do you blame your father's death on this country's zero COVID policy?
Yes, very sure.
He says his father was in healthy condition when he suddenly collapsed. No one could go in or out of the building for help. He shows me the numerous calls he and his mother made to the emergency line. He recorded one of his many calls as he became increasingly desperate. He says the ambulance took an hour to arrive. By then, it was too late. He shows us the way to the hospital.
It took us about 5 minutes to get from his house to the hospital, less than 2 miles away. When his father was sick, he had 4 relatives waiting outside his building, begging to go in and drive him to the hospital, but they wouldn't let them in.
He says authorities in the hospital gave him no explanation for why the ambulance took so long. All they gave him was this document stating the date and time of his father's death. His mother, unable to speak, overcome with grief. She cries like this day and night.
Why are you taking the risk to speak to us?
I don't want this kind of thing happen again in China and anywhere because of the lockdown and the medical shortage of ambulance caused my father's death.
Outrage in China is mounting over the human costs of the country's draconian zero COVID policy. China carefully counts every COVID death, but not the countless people who've died because they couldn't get emergency care during lockdown. Authorities have acknowledged many of those cases, but they usually blame poor enforcement of zero COVID instead of the policy itself. Before his father's death, he fully supported the country's zero COVID policy. But the local government's execution of the policy is beyond reasoning, he says. It's inhuman. He shows me his favorite picture of his father, surrounded by family. His son, who was closest to his grandfather, now struggles to eat or focus, he tells me. The corner of his room piled with lettuce, potatoes, leeks, and canned food.
He says all this food here is in case they get locked down again.
The corn planted by his father is one of the few things he left behind. His grief now mixed with fury. He struggles to comprehend the meaning of it all. His father's death in the name of zero COVID.
That was Selena Wang reporting. Hong Kong's former bishop has long been an outspoken advocate for freedom in China, and it's gotten him into trouble. Cardinal Joseph Zen was arrested back in May for his connection to a humanitarian fund, and on Friday, he found out his fate. Cardinal Joseph Zen has been convicted for his support of pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The 90-year-old Bishop Emeritus was treasurer of the 612 Humanitarian Relief Fund, which was set up to help resistance protesters. The cardinal has been found guilty of failing to timely register, according to the court, a relief fund set up to pay fines and bail for people arrested in the 2019 protests. As a result, he'll have to pay a fine of around $500. Cardinal Zen is known for his fierce advocacy of change in China.
As all believers, we must be optimistic, but doesn't mean that we can hope in immediate success, because every relation depends on two parts. Now, if China doesn't change its policy, there's nothing we can expect.
Along with the Bishop Emeritus, 6 others have been convicted, including a pop singer, a lawyer, and an LGBTQ activist. In a rare move, the Vatican is calling out China, not over the protests, but a broken deal. Beijing violated the terms of a controversial agreement it made with the Holy See on the appointment of bishops by installing one in a diocese not recognized by Rome. The 2018 deal, which was just renewed last month, has never been made public, but Vatican officials say it outlines procedures for ensuring bishops are elected by the Catholic community in China and approved by the Pope before their ordinations and installations. Now to yet another virus. Scientists could potentially be prying open Pandora's box. An ancient zombie virus has been discovered in melting permafrost in Siberia. The nearly 50,000-year-old find is stirring up fears that another pandemic could occur. As global temperatures rise, researchers are worried that previously dormant microbes could be unleashed into the world, but so far, this so-called Pandora virus only infects single-cell organisms, so humans are in the clear. Still to come on Currents News, he could soon be a saint, but for now, he's a superhero. We'll show you a new comic book out now. And this.
I just couldn't believe it. I thought I would never see her again.
A Christmas miracle. Parents reunited with their child 51 years after she was kidnapped. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. He could be the first millennial saint, but first, let me introduce you to Carlo the comic. Digital disciple Carlo Acutis and the Eucharist is out now, telling the story of the real-life teen who used his knowledge of computers and technology to document the world's Eucharistic miracles online. The tech whiz teen died in 2006 from leukemia. He was beatified in 2020, making him one step closer to sainthood. Are you a comic collector? Well, don't miss this one. Might be a good Christmas gift. You can buy it online at shop.voyagecomics.com. Just search for the issue, and once again, it's called Digital Disciple, Carlo Acutis and the Eucharist. It'll cost you just $6.99. Not bad. Now to a holiday miracle. They never thought they would see their daughter again, but this year she made it to Thanksgiving dinner in Fort Worth. Currents News' Andy Madison has the long-lost family reunion, half a century in the making.
After more than half a century of being separated from her family, Melissa Highsmith is making up for lost time.
It's good to see what I looked like when I was a baby.
The now 53-year-old back with her parents after she was kidnapped at just 22 months old in 1971.
It is overwhelming, but at the same time, it's just the most wonderful feeling in the world.
I just couldn't believe it. I thought I would never see her again.
And they said, "Dad, she's alive." And I started crying. And after 51 years, it's so emotional.
The journey to this heartfelt reunion began in September when a tip from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children thought there was a sighting of Melissa in Charleston, South Carolina.
What it did is it springboarded our family to a national story.
While that tip failed, it got the family to keep pushing to find her. A 23andMe DNA test came back with a match, linking Melissa's children with their family. They reached out to her over Facebook, and at first, she thought it was a scam.
My father texted me on Messenger, and he told me, I've been looking for my daughter for 51 years.
This whole time, Melissa didn't know her real family was trying to find her.
The person that raised me, I asked her, is there anything that you need to tell me? And it was confirmed that she knew that I was baby Melissa. So that just made it real.
Melissa then agreed to take a DNA test. And on Thanksgiving, she met her family.
I feel that was the best day that I ever had in my whole life, when I saw Melissa again.
And meeting her for the first time, it was hard to put into words. It was just a dream come true.
So where was Melissa this whole time? Right here in Fort Worth. It's a family miracle just in time to celebrate the holidays.
She's going to have more love than I think she knows what to do with.
My heart right now is just full and bursting with just so much emotion, and I'm just really happy.
Melissa says she now wants to remarry her husband so her father can walk her down the aisle. Andy Madison, Currents News.
Amazing. The White House is getting into the Christmas spirit. First Lady Jill Biden unveiling the theme of this year's decorations, We the People. For the people, by the people. More than 150 volunteers gave up their time to help dress the White House. And there's some must-sees. See if you can spot the furry members of the Biden family, Dog Commander and Cat Willow. They'll come to greet you at the end of a regular winter wonderland in the entrance hall, which contains papier-mâché trees hand-painted. And of course, the main Christmas tree in the Blue Room. This year, it has birds from every state. And now that you're in the Christmas spirit, let's get into the giving spirit as well. Earlier in the newscast, we told you about the launch of the Tablet's Bright Christmas campaign. The program, which began making Christmas brighter for the less fortunate children of the diocese in the 1960s, needs your help. Just make a check out to the Bright Christmas Fund and mail it to Bright Christmas LB number 2118, P.O. Box 95,000, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the zip code 19195. Or you can make your donation online with PayPal or a credit card at thetablet.org/brightchristmas. Pretty easy. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.